like if you guys want to set up a time during spring break or something like that to do a couple FRQs on Discord, we can do it in the Rochester Computer Club chat, or I can make a Google Meet, or I can do whatever. Like I just want you guys to feel comfortable with all the FRQs and stuff. Multiple choice as well, we can do. All right. Here we go. A statistician is studying the sequences of numbers obtained by repeatedly tossing a six-sided number cube, otherwise known as a die. On each side of the number cube, like seriously, who calls it a number cube? Is a single number in the range of 1 to 6. Shocking. And no number is repeated on the cube. The statistician is particularly interested in runs of numbers. A run occurs when 2 or more consecutive tosses of the cube are in the same value. For example, in the following sequence, there are runs starting at positions 1, 6, 12, and 14. 1. Yeah, so 5, 5, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, and 5, 5, 5, 5. So toss is not shown, but we're going to assume it gives us a perfectly random number. Write the method getCubeTosses that takes a number cube and a number of tosses as parameters. The method should return an array of the values produced by tossing them. Oh, okay. So we basically have to fill an array with tosses. So, and we know how long the array is. So that's, again, I'm going to type in what I'm going to do. So they have the toss here. We need to toss this cube this many times. So what I'm going to do is create an array num tosses long, integer array, and then use a for loop to fill the array with tosses. Return the array. I think that's what I'm supposed to do. Return an array of the values. Okay. So let's create an int array. Int, let's call it tosses equals new int, and it's num tosses long. We're going to assume that num tosses is greater than or equal to 0. Usually they'll do that for you on the exam. They're not going to be worried about people trying to send you a negative length array or something like that. So a for loop. Right, where you need a for loop that starts at 0 and does it num tosses times. And all we have to do is say our array at position I becomes equal to a toss. So cube dot toss. We were passed in a number cube here. So we should call toss on that number cube, and it will return an integer value for us. And then we just need to return tosses. All right, so let's see if that works. Greatest programmer alive. Of course it works. Completely bug-free and perfect in every way. Any questions on how I did that, why I didn't do it differently? How did I get to be the best programmer in the world? Why I don't work for a giant programming company? No? Nothing? Okay. All right. Number cube B. That same statistician is studying sequence of numbers, blah, 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 blah. Same thing. Write the method getLongestRun. Okay, so now we've got a challenge. It takes as its parameter an array of integer values representing a series of number cube tosses. Yeah, we know that. It returns the starting index in the array of a run of maximum size. So whichever number is repeated the most number of times, it'll return the index of that, of the start of that run. It doesn't matter, like, so if there are two runs of the same length, like in that example, it says it doesn't matter which one it returns. So it can return either 6 or 14. If there are no runs, if all the numbers do not duplicate, at least not consecutively, not right next to each other, then we'll return -1. Wow. How are we going to do this? All right. So I know we're going to need longest run position. I'm just going to call it LRP, longest run position. Okay. So I'm going to need a for loop to go through the array. I'm imagining it in my head right now. I would use a piece of paper for this if I were really trying to do it for an exam. So I recommend that. So I write down all the numbers. I start on the left-hand side and I say, if this number man, there's a few different ways to do this. Okay, so do I want to look ahead or look behind? I think I want to look ahead because that will make it easier for me to store the position of the start of the array. So what I'm imagining in my mind right now is I look at each number and then I say, while the following number is the same as the number at my current position, add 1 to a counter. I'm also going to have to check to make sure I don't go off the end of the array in that while loop. And then once that while loop is no longer true, if the length, that counter, is greater than the maximum I've seen so far, then store that first position in my longest repeated position. Okay. So I'm going to write my for loop. So for loop over values. I'm going to have an I as my current position. Longest run position. I got to make this bigger. long run position, and long run length. I'm going to set this equal to 1 because that's going to actually help me. If you think about it, I need my longest run to be at least 2 to actually count as a longest run. So in order to change this position, I need my longest run length to be greater than 1. If it's not greater than 1, then it's not actually a run. So I don't want to change my longest run position. So while the following value equals the value at I, add 1 to a counter. Okay. If the counter is greater than longest run length, set the longest run position equal to I, set longest run length equal to the counter. And the last thing I need to do is return longest run position. All right. So I'm gonna go through my values, and I'm gonna say, first I need a counter. My counter up here. So my counter will always start at 1 because there's always a run of 1. And I'm going to say while the values, actually, you know what? I'm going to do my length check. Okay, well, I'll do that second. So while my values at I plus counter equals values at I, counter plus plus. So what this means is as long as the element of the values array at wherever I started, I, plus the run length so far is the same as the element at I. So as long as, right, we're going through the array one element at a time, as long as, and then from that element, we start counting out how many are the same as that element. So as long as we're counting out the same number as that element, then we keep adding 1 to the counter. We keep going. Okay. If counter is greater than the longest run length so far, then that means we have a new record. And we can set the longest run position equal to where the run started, and the longest run length equal to the counter. All right. I think this should work. The problem is if we're at the last element of the array, we don't want to go off the end of the array of values. So we want to make sure that I plus counter is less than values dot length. Okay, we don't want to go off the end of the array. All right. Let's see if this works. Wow. I'm kind of surprised. No typos or anything. So going through the code one more time, I set the longest run position to -1 because that's the default. If there are no runs, then we return -1. I set the default longest run length to 1 because we know there's some numbers, right, in the array. We don't know if there are any runs longer than 1, which don't really count as runs anyway. And then I just set the counter to 0. Doesn't matter there. I go through every single index in the array. I start with that number in that array, and I check, and I have a while loop that adds a counter every time it finds the same number as the one at position I. So if there are none, then the counter stays at 1, and that doesn't get set to the longest because it's already 1. Like we know that 1 is the longest so far. If it gets to 2 or more, then it'll set the position to wherever that started, the letter or the position we're checking right now, and it'll set the longest run so far to whatever the length of that repeated number is. So I would go through this literally, if this is not making sense to you, I would go through it with a pencil and paper. Like literally write down the values of the array and go through it and see what each of these variables is doing. And my advice for the AP exam is even if you don't understand how to do something, write down your ideas because you will get points, and some points are better than no points. It is very, very unlikely that you will get all of the programs perfect. Some are easier than others. Some are harder than others. Some are trick questions. It's okay, right? You're just trying to gather points. You're not trying to be perfect. It's okay not to be perfect on this exam. They will give you points for your ideas, even if they don't work perfectly. So make sure you get your ideas down.